Hello, and welcome to the Get Better podcast, the audio outlet that serves to help you identify, manage, understand, and hopefully overcome many of the challenges we face in our lives. We talk to people who are focused on getting us better, whether that be physical, emotional, or mental. Each week, we're going to talk to an expert in a given field and get their input and suggestions around getting better. Hello, and thank you guys again for joining me. We are now at episode 3, so yay, we made it 3 episodes. I'm pretty excited about that, actually. I guess what I didn't realize going into this was anything at all, because I really didn't have a clue what doing a podcast really was, aside from taping an interview with somebody and publishing it. And that was that. But I was severely mistaken, because what I came to find out was there is a tremendous amount of work that goes on in the background. And I'm not even including, finding folks to talk to. I'm just talking about, pre and post production, the website aspect, social media plays a big role. A lot of factors I really didn't take into consideration. Anyway, I'm working on it. I'm working through it, trying to figure out how to make this better, trying to find out what's really appealing to you folks, what's not. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to let you guys know we've now got Twitter up. It's at Get Better Show, Get Better Podcast on Instagram, YouTube. You can check out the website, getbetterpodcast.com. Everything's there. Just before we get started, I just want to let you know, today I'm going to be talking to a gentleman named Fred Stuvek. Fred is a very learned, experienced man, military background, grew up in rural United States. When I talked to Fred, and I think this will resonate in the interview, I kind of felt like I was talking to an uncle. You know that uncle that you don't really know what his job is, but he's like very successful and has been in his life, and he's always kind of there when you have those family gatherings, and he takes you aside and talks to you and gives you a little bit of advice. That's very much the feeling I got out of speaking to Fred Stuvek. And I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Let's just get back into it. And again, thank you guys for listening. Hello, everybody. Today, I am honored to have the opportunity to talk to someone who has been incredibly, if not extraordinarily, successful in his lifetime. Fred Stuvek is not only a Pennsylvania Hall of Famer in an array of sports. This gentleman, he went from tremendous athletic achievements to become a high-ranking officer in the Navy, and only then pursued his professional career outside of the military. Fred also published a book called It Starts With You. It's really more of a guideline to what I would call achievement, if you will. And again, it's like 200 pages of the easiest reading that I've really done in a while. So, Fred, I'd like to introduce you to the show. Thank you for being with us today.
Jeremy, thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to talk with you again.
I don't want to speak at all for you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, that sounds fair. I was born in West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia, to be specific. And I was raised in southwestern Pennsylvania. In southwestern Pennsylvania, it was a small coal mining town. Good people, good, strong work ethic. Played a lot of sports. After graduating from high school, during my time in high school, I was fortunate my senior year to be recruited by a number of colleges and universities, and I decided to go to the Naval Academy. The atmosphere, the sense of purpose, the discipline, I just knew it would make me a better person. And I was also captivated with the opportunity to serve my country. While at the Naval Academy, I played football. I later quarterback for 3 years. And after graduation, I was commissioned, and I served for 5 years in the military. After my military service, I transitioned to the business world, where I had a fairly diverse range of experience in both the public and private sector, including a successful IPO and later starting up and selling my own company. I've done a lot of travel, business-wise, internationally, which is why at this point in time I have approximately 7 million frequent flyer miles. So that's, and recently wrote the book. So there you are.
Wow, that's great. Speaking of the book, and again, I don't necessarily want to center everything around the book. I know I had spoken to you earlier, and we talked about it, and I told you that I took a couple days and read through it, and I loved it. One of the messages, or one of the kind of topics that you talk a lot about in the book, is beliefs. And the book, by the way, it's called "It Starts With You." Can you talk to me, Fred, about how beliefs, and maybe more specifically, how does somebody take the idea of the belief system, and how do you actually adopt that idea to really believing in yourself?
Well, that's an excellent question. The way the book is put together was not by serendipity or accident. That the first chapter is belief, or belief specifically. If you do not believe in yourself, it's going to be difficult for other people to believe in you, because they're going to pick up on that lack of confidence. So that's where it starts. You have to believe in yourself. And there are various ways to do that. And we can cover that later during our discussion. The next thing is to believe in what you're doing. If you believe in yourself and have that confidence, have the skill set, and you believe in what you're doing, and you're passionate about it, you believe in your mission, your job, or whatever it is you're doing, that's going to help you. Because as we all know, life is not always an upward trajectory. You have peaks and valleys. You have challenges. You have to weather adversity. And when you have that strong belief in yourself and what you're doing, it's going to come in very handy when adversity comes knocking, because it definitely will.
Kind of sticking on that topic for a second. I mean, great answer. Definitely been times in my life when I have a lot of trouble believing in myself. And I think a lot of us feel that way sometimes. But that's chapter 1 in your book. So while you give a really great way of understanding why it's really important, I guess what I'm really trying to understand is, when you feel like that adversity around, not having the ability to do that, what sort of techniques do you use, or what advice might you give us around developing that skill to really believe in yourself?
Well, let me back up, Jeremy, if you don't mind. Sure. One other issue that is very important with belief is fit. There has to be a good fit for what you're doing. Okay? And you have to have a good balance. When I talk about balance, you have to believe in yourself and what you're doing, and it has to match up with your value system, and it has to be a good fit. Now, what does that mean? That means, for example, let's say you take a job and your value system, or your goals are largely, let's say they're largely intrinsic. Okay, that's going to help get you through things. But if it's largely extrinsic, and you don't really believe in what you're doing, that's going to be a bit of a mismatch, because you're going to be going through the motions simply because it's something that you're doing for financial gain or whatever. And in the long run, that balance or lack of commitment is going to come back and get you. So you have to have a good fit. You have to be working with a good group of people and a good company that has the same value system that you do as well, because that's going to help you throughout your career and throughout that time with the company.
It seems to make sense. I just find, from a realistic standpoint, that's something that's often difficult to do, especially given the kind of the state of affairs of the way that we are today. I mean, I don't want to speak out of line, but as an example, watching my own kids grow up and watching what they're looking to do with the rest of their lives, and deciding on what schools they're going to go to, and possibly what kind of a career path they're going to take, it's become fairly evident that there's a lot of unknowns. So I think all the things that you are saying are certainly foundations for how to do that. But I think it's really difficult in society today to really figure that out, especially as a young person, even somebody who's in their 20s and 30s, you have so many things that are important to you. How do you, a person who's achieved all this varying levels of success, how do you position that? How do you say, look, I want to have a house. I want to have a good career. I want to raise my children right. And then how do you balance that again with the whole belief system, and then saying, look, I also have to work for a good company and work with good people. Extrinsically, I can't look at money as being the single factor in what I'm doing.
You mentioned you had a son. Was he
Two, actually.
junior?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay, let's say your son is trying to decide where to go to college or trying to look at a career. I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to do a self-assessment. In other words, you have to take a look inside yourself and assess, what are my strengths and weaknesses? And it's good to ask other people too. How do you see me? What do you see as something I would be good at, or that you would recommend for me? At the same time, think about what you enjoy. What is it that your son enjoys? What they say that if you can find a job that you do for free, no, I don't advocate that, but it's just a saying, so to speak. If there's a job that you can do for free and that you enjoy doing, that it's something that that is what you want to do. So you have to figure out what it is you want to do. Now, that's a journey in and of itself. When I say that, you need to look around, talk to other people, try other things. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes it's knowing what you don't like to do to figure out what you want to do. For example, let's say that you think you want to work in this industry. You could go to that company, try to get an internship, talk to people in the company, get a feel for what's going on, see what the rhythm's like, and that'll give you a better idea. But the more exposure you have and the more experiences you have, the better you're going to be able to hone in on what it is that you like to do and that you want to do. And I think that's an important distinction. It should be what you want to do versus what other people want to do. There is a difference, and as a parent, that can be a difficult discussion sometimes. But if you have a child and you want the child to do A, B, or C, and he or she wants to do D, E, and F, they're going to do it grudgingly. Their heart's not going to be in it. And eventually that's going to catch up with them. So it has to be a good fit. It has to be something that they believe in. And it used to be in former times that someone would go to college, get a general degree, and then sort of figure out what it was they were going to do. I think in today's environment, we've become more specialized. So as a result, I think the more specific you can get at some point in terms of honing in on a career, occupation, skill, whatever, the better off you're going to be. And then once you have found that, dive deep, do everything you can to become as good as you can, to build up your skill set, increase your confidence, and be successful.
Great. I really appreciate that. That's some good insight. Let's switch gears a little bit. Tell me, in terms of you, what would you say, or who has been what you would consider a source of inspiration for yourself?
Well, that's a good question. I would say my parents came from, as I said earlier, I came from a small coal mining town. We had a family of 7, and even though my father was a school teacher, sometimes the money was a little tight, and my mother or father sometimes would take on different jobs to make ends meet. Never complained, and took care of the family. And to me, that was very important. It kind of set the standard for me. And it also reinforced the fact to me that it's not about you. It's about taking care of the family, taking care of the children. If you're in a company, it's about taking care of the employees. And when you do that, the rest of the stuff will come together. But if you don't take care of your family, you don't take care of the people that report to you work with, that's going to come back on you eventually. So I'd say that was my inspiration. And I would say another factor that was my inspiration were a lot of the teachers and coaches I had. It's hard to single out one, but each one had a unique contribution to helping me realize certain things. And I'm thankful for that. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, Jeremy, but That's the
Oh,
one I'm
I'm
staying
just
with.
looking for your answer. I'm not looking for any particular answer.
Okay.
I think it's a good one. It's nice. It's really a
Yeah.
nice one.
Yeah.
Your parents. I don't think a lot of us think of our parents in such a light anymore. And I think that's really telling about the kind of person that you are.
Well, it's also telling, Jeremy, about our society to a great extent, because you can talk about nature versus nurture all you want, and I'll put my money on nurture most of the time, because we are a product of our environment. We are a product of our upbringing. So that has a big impact on what we're doing. And if you have a stable family environment where you're given a lot of opportunity, that's going to help. As an example, there was a book called Outliers written by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yep. Very
who is
familiar.
one of my favorite authors. But if you read the book Outliers, or any of your audience out there has read it, there was one issue that he brought up. It was the nature versus nurture. He made a very compelling case that it was nurture in the environment and the opportunities that you are afforded during your formative years that largely determine how well you're going to be, how well you're going to do later on in life.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember reading your book. You actually mentioned Outliers at least once or twice as well. And I'm not going to give all that away, but I noticed that. And then Outliers is a fantastic read. So we talked a little about what has inspired you and drawn you to become who you have become. Conversely, what I wanted to ask was, and this is kind of a 3-part question. So, Fred, what would you say? Looking back, what would you say was your biggest mistake, and what helped you identify that? And then what really helped you, or what kind of a methodology or technique did you use to get over that yourself?
I would say my biggest mistake was in planning. And when I was planning, not accounting for all of the dire circumstances that might occur. Now, what do I mean? For example, when you're putting together a plan or starting up a company, sometimes you go into this thing with rose-colored glasses, and things don't work out the way that you think they are. Well, that was a pretty good lesson for me, and I got through it and I learned from it, made me a better person, and it actually helped me later on whenever we got into some very trying circumstances. And understanding that things are not always going to work out the way that you think they are is a very important lesson. And you always have to be prepared for something to go wrong, because as you know, Jeremy, you can have the best plan in the world, but sometimes things just don't work out.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I mean, if we could just stick on that topic for a second, and I don't mean to dive into any of your failures or your mistakes, but
no.
I'll be honest with you. When I speak to somebody who I find successful and that I admire, I find it interesting to talk to them about the things that they've failed at, because we all fail at some point. And I think, and again, just my opinion, I am not an expert. It seems that people who make more mistakes and people who fail more often are usually better examples of success, because you don't see the mistakes. From an outside point of view, you don't see that. You see all the, like you said, you see everything through those rose-colored glasses. So I like to understand that person behind that success. Would you, what made you identify the fact that you had not really been successful at your planning?
Well, it was when we first started with my new company, which I sold the year before last. And things have eventually worked out well. But I think sometimes what happens, Jeremy, is when you have an idea or a company that you're passionate and you're excited about, you automatically assume, or you make the assumption, that everybody else is going to be that excited about what you're doing. And at the end of the day, it's not about how you view things. It's about the value that you bring to the customer and the perception the customer has of that value. So just because you build a ballpark or a stadium doesn't mean the fans are going to flock in. You have to have a good team. You have to perform. So that was one of the things that kind of stuck with me, was that even though you start up a new business, you have to look at it from the customer's perspective. What is it that you bring that is of value to them? How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? And how do you deliver that message to them? And it's a very complex, but it's also a very simple process as well. So I think you have to look at it more from the customer perspective, other than the fact that, hey, we have a great idea, we have a great company, this is going to go great. Well, that's fine. You have to believe in that. But more importantly, your customer has to believe in what you're doing and has to see the added value that's out there and how you compare to the competition. Does that make sense to you, Jeremy?
It absolutely makes sense. Do you think that you could apply that then, that same idealism, on a personal level in your life outside of business? Is that something? And then what would that parallel be? Or how do you kind of see that as being a parallel? If you agree, or I don't know if you agree with that, but I'd be curious to hear what you have to say around that idea. You have a good idea. You think it's the best thing in the world, like we all do, whatever our ideas are. You know, you pitch that idea, maybe you start putting it in place, and then you find out that, you know what, the perception out there, the atmosphere, the audience for my idea is really not so keen on the idea that I had expected. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the message that you're sending here by talking about, you know, identifying your mistakes. But outside of business, do you think that's also kind of an applicable idealism? And then how or where do you see that being applied, or where do you see those kind of parallel lines being drawn, you know, maybe in more interpersonal relationships?
You know, I believe I have a fairly unique, diverse background by virtue of my time in the sports and military and in business, both in the private and public sector. One thing that struck me is that the fundamentals apply across the spectrum. And what makes you successful in any environment can be translated and transferred to another environment. You know, for example, I'll go back to the business thing and I'll try to circle back and make it the personal thing. For example, on the business thing, the thing that we found out was, well, it's a complicated decision-making process. And even though we were the fastest, the least expensive, and the most convenient, and other things, we had to communicate that message to a number of decision makers within different organizations. So it becomes a communication, becomes a messaging issue, and then there's the issue of repetition. But you also have to be able to explain it so that it's a benefit to your customer. So if you look at it from a personal standpoint, and let's say there's certain things that you're doing in your life with your family, with your wife, with your loved ones, whatever. I mean, if there's something that you want to do, I mean, you have to sell that as well. You have to explain, you know, what is it? What are the benefits? What are the risks? Here's how we're going to do it. And then ask for feedback. And I think that's one of the things that people are sometimes not good at, is getting feedback. Because it's not always about having the answers, Jeremy. It's also knowing where to get the answers from by asking the right questions. And I think another thing that's important too is constructive criticism. I think a lot of people have problems with constructive criticism, but the only way that you're going to get any better is by learning from your mistakes and looking at that game film, so to speak. Pretty painful whenever you throw an interception and the coach replays it 10 times. It's really not, there's only one interception, but it's 10 times when you're sitting in that room. But you learn from that mistake. So you have to be able to be open to input, take advice from people, solicit their opinion. And when you do that, they'll be a part of the decision-making process. They'll understand it better. They may not agree, but the fact that they're involved they'll appreciate it, and you'll have better buy-in and a better relationship with it, with whoever it is that you're working with.
How do you differentiate constructive criticism from non-interest criticism, or people that will criticize just for the sake of criticizing, like you see happening tremendously in social media today, where we have people that put themselves out there? Feedback is as anonymous and as rampant as anybody wants. And, there's a lot of interesting constructive criticism that people give people. And there's a lot of, we'll call it non-constructive. But as a, Fred, as a business person, as an athlete, as somebody who's kind of had a lot of barriers in front of you, how do you differentiate that? I think that's really important. And I think that's something that a lot of us, well, certainly I would love some insight on, how you think about that, because I think it's relevant.
That's a good point, Jeremy. As an example, it's just one small example. I did this with my children, and actually did this in my last company. But if someone came to me with a problem, they weren't allowed to say, okay, this is the problem, and they just look at me or look at one of my managers. Every problem has a recommendation. So when someone comes to you with a problem, there should be a recommendation. By the same token, if you look at what's happening today, there's a lot of negative discourse. You don't see a lot of positive messages today. I like to take the high road. I do not like the negativity. In the long run, that's not a winning proposition. So I would submit that if there's something that's going on, and let's say that you are taking a position on a certain thing and you gave a speech, but they may say, you talk too fast, and I don't think that we need to lower this price because this will happen. Well, that's constructive criticism. Somebody told me I was talking too fast, and people sometimes tell me that. So I make a conscious effort to try to slow down. That's constructive criticism. And if someone says, I don't like your position, I think we should do this instead, then you can have a discussion about it. But if someone comes up to you and said, I hated your speech, that's a stupid position, and then assails you, relentlessly because of that, that is not constructive criticism. And I think when those things happen, Jeremy, I think you need to show a little class, take the rise above the fray, and not get down dirty with them. I think you acknowledge it, maintain your composure, and continue to follow through with your position and what you're doing if you think it's right. So don't be swayed by all the negative rhetoric and all the critics out there, because sometimes they're just chirping because they can, and they may never see them again. And the problem too on social media is that there's some of the anonymity, but if you look at it, we've almost gotten to the point where it's not what you've done that matters. It's what you've done that you can be attacked for. Now, I believe we need to be a little more tolerant and understanding of people. Let people make mistakes. That's human nature. And if someone's had a great career, done a good job, and they make one mistake, he or she does, don't make this such a huge issue that you lose sight of the fact that what they've been doing for the last X number of years has really been a honorable and rightful thing. So I think we sometimes need to be a little more tolerant, a little more understanding, give people the benefit of the doubt, and understand that sometimes people make mistakes.
Were you thinking about anybody in particular, or was there an example that was popping up in your head when you were thinking about that?
I would say politicians on both sides of the fence.
Okay.
I would say people in companies. I would say people on just about in any walk of life. I would like to see us become more objective, more rational, talking about the issues rather than trying to push forward, a certain position or agenda. Now, it's good to have that dialogue. I mean, we are a democracy, and there's heated debate sometimes, but I think sometimes it's getting out of hand. And I think a lot of people in the country, including myself, would like to see things move back, become a little more civil. And I'm sure you feel the same way too, don't you?
I would have to agree with that statement. What I was thinking about when I was reading your book was this question, and I wrote it down, and I crossed it out, and then I wrote it down again, and then I crossed it out as I was reading, and then I wrote it down again, crossed it out. By the time I was done, I looked at that thing that I had wrote and crossed out so many times, and I said, I think I'm going to ask this question. So I'm going to ask you the question. And honestly, I don't think it's
Here we come.
No, I don't. I think I'm going to be like,
Jeremy, that's fine. I told you, I said, ask any question you want to. This is unscripted, and this is the way it's supposed to go. So,
yeah, and look, and this really, honestly, I don't even know why I'm winding this up, because you're going to just say that you're almost going to feel a little deflated, I think. But the question
I'm very interested. You got my attention.
Oh, no. Well, maybe I shouldn't ask this one. I should ask the other one. What do you think that are some barriers that most people really fall subject to that limits their ability to progress or their abilities completely? I mean, in your own opinion.
That's a good question.
Okay.
I would say it's a number of things. In no particular order. Many people don't like change. They don't. They like the status quo. Well, everything may seem the same today, but a year from now, things will be different. Guarantee that. So you have to accept that change is inevitable. It's something that occurs. And it's going to force you out of your comfort zone. So you have to embrace it as an opportunity, not a threat. And when change does happen, you have to focus on the positive aspects, ditch the negative thinking, and understand that this creates a chance for personal and professional growth. And sometimes you want to make a change, but change doesn't happen because you are associating with a like-minded group of people. They don't want anything to disrupt their little circle. As a result, when you start stepping out and doing something that disrupts their rhythm, they might get on you a little bit. So, the more you succumb to the wishes and desires of other people to stay the course and stay comfortable and hang out with them, if you follow what I'm saying, that's not a good scenario. So you need to rethink that. But I would say that fear is also another issue. Fear has probably killed more dreams than failure, and could be the single biggest reason for someone not reaching their potential. When you talk about fear, avoidance is not a winning strategy. It only makes things worse. What you end up running from, you're eventually going to run into. You can really count on that happening. So you have to face fear head on and condition your mind and body to overcome these fears, because your mindset is your primary weapon. So you have to have a strong mindset. You have to understand that getting out of your comfort zone and being able to fail is not a bad thing. For example, let's say you make a decision not to do something because you're afraid of failure. Well, that's a failure in and of itself, because you made a decision not to do something because you're afraid of something, and that is not the way to go about things. You've heard the expression, no pain, no gain. I submit, no discomfort, no growth. Now, what happens when you put yourself out there, Jeremy? You may do fine.
Scary, yeah.
And you may find it's going to work out. You know what that does? It builds confidence. But by the same token, you may just crash and burn. But you're going to learn from it and move on, and hopefully be better equipped to deal with those situations in the future. The important point is to build on the successes, put the negative stuff behind you, focus on the positive, and move ahead. Now, also associated with that is a lack of confidence. And that's also a reason why people don't take action and pursue their dreams and achieve their goals. Decisions are made on, what you don't want to have happen and what you want to avoid. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But you have to develop that skill set. You have to develop that self-confidence by diving deep into what it is you're about, develop the skills, develop good habits. You've heard the expression, we're creatures of habit. Well, you want to be a creature of good habit and develop the right habits and the right mindset to develop the skills and the discipline that you're going to need to succeed. And the more you do that, the more confident you're going to become. Now, Jeremy, I don't believe that someone is born with confidence or without confidence. If that was the case, we wouldn't have all these self-help books out there. It goes back to our nature versus nurture discussion. Mm-hmm. It can be developed and acquired over time. And there is something you can do about it. And the same holds true with discipline. Discipline is the soul of your journey. And it's one of the most important traits for success. And it gives you the will to step outside of your comfort zone and to take those actions that you need to do, and enables you to stick to a routine and a regimen for success. And Jeremy, I'm sure you're the same as I am. You have a certain routine, a certain rhythm that you get into, and that's important. It's all about the routine. And when you wake up in the morning, you know what you're going to do. You have your day planned out, or you better, because if you don't, you're just going to go. You're going to end up going anywhere. And that same thing applies to your life. You need to have a plan. You need to have a personal plan. You need to have a professional plan. And as I said in my book, the third thing that's very important is you need to have a fitness plan, because the better shape you're in, the more equipped you are to deal with some of the issues you're going to have to associate with later on. So you have to strike a good balance. Now, Jeremy, that was a long answer to a very complicated question, and we could write a book about that issue just in and of itself. But I hope you got what I said. Well, Jeremy, I'd like to bring one thing too. When you talk about success, I think people lose sight of the fact that success is not just one thing. It's a myriad issues which have to be addressed and developed over time to get you to the point where you're successful. You just can't wing it. You have to work at it, and it doesn't come overnight. Now, you can be anything that you...
Fred, you're killing me. Really?
Yeah. No, Jeremy, you and your son can be anything that you want to be, but you have to have a plan, okay? You have to train for it, and then you have to put it into action. You have to be committed and follow through and always persevere. And that's why part 3 of my book, Perseverance in Adversity, the 2 chapters that I cover are so important too, because I think some of the people today, some of the children today, I think we've done a disservice. They get trophies for just showing up or participating. They are praised, most of their life. They go to college, they get out in the workforce, and all of a sudden they get hammered, and they wonder what happened. Well, they haven't. You can't deal with something if you've never experienced it before. So I would say that the more that you can put yourself and others in situations where they're challenged, the better equipped they're going to be later on in life to get through those tough situations, which, as we all know, they do occur.
They definitely do. And it's great. You just gave me really good entree for the next question that I wanted to ask, which was really, what concerns or worries you about the future versus, of our society, of the people, of our world, of what's going on?
It's a good question. I would say, number one, thinking about this, Jeremy, when was the last time and I don't watch the news that much. I kind of got away from it. I think a lot of people have. When was the last time you saw a positive message?
I cannot remember.
Okay. I think that's one of the things. I mean, there really aren't any positive messages out there. And I think with what's going on, I'm just concerned that some of these young people who are being shaped and are growing up and becoming adults who can contribute to society don't become jaded or jaundiced in their views in terms of, what's going on. And I mean, secondly, I think we have to be able to understand and accept other people's position, even if you don't agree with it. And that's sometimes it isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do. I mean, for example, let's say you're in a company. One of the things you always have to do is to be able to take that input and take that constructive criticism from other people. That's the only way you're going to find out what's going on. Well, it's one thing to, like I said before, have constructive criticism. It's another thing to just assail someone because you don't believe in it. And sometimes, in companies, they tend to shoot messengers too. So I think we need to be a little more tolerant on the messengers, but at the same time, I think the messengers need to hone in on their message a little bit better, and hopefully there'll be more civil discourse in the future. Jeremy, I mentioned earlier, I've traveled a lot. I've about 7 million frequent flyer miles. You name the country, I've been there. The more I travel, the more I realize that we are much more alike than we are different. Everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants to, have a career, raise a family, have a good standard of life. And, to the extent that we can do that in this country, I think that would be a very good thing. And, I'm also concerned that we need to start developing our young folks with the proper skill sets. I mean, in some countries, there are different types of skill sets you can develop. You have academic, you have trade skills, things like that. So I think we need to invest more in education and training in our country. And I would also like to see us spend more time, put in more effort, money into treating mental health and the opioid crisis. Those are two of the other things that I think are just looming and are a real negative force in this country.
So a lot of people out there dispense a lot of advice. And we hear a lot of that advice, and we hear it through the news outlets. We hear it again, through things like social media, through the internet, through our friends, through our coworkers, in our jobs, from our bosses. Based on your experience in your life and your travels, what would you say is maybe one piece of, let's call it conventional advice, that you disagree with most strongly?
Conventional advice.
Or unconventional advice, but advice that, yeah.
Conventional. Can you give me are you talking about in terms of education?
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Sure. So a piece of conventional advice that a lot of us adhere to. You have to have a 4.0 GPA in school. You're going to go to college, you're going to get a job, and you're going to get married, house.
Okay. Gotcha.
Fence the dog. Now, again, that's that's the most bland piece of conventional advice, I think. But there's, so many others. But, we hear things resonate, and this is advice that's handed down and handed down and handed down. I just wanted to see, given that you have a kind of a different perspective on the way life has gone for you, can you think of some conventional advice maybe that we adhere to that you don't agree with, or you disagree with?
That's a good question, and since you framed it, I was thinking, and I right now the thing that pops into my mind is, and this message is focused to some of those young adults out there, some of these teens. I mean, in former times, there was always the adage that you would work with a company, you go work for a company, you'd have a career, a lifelong career with that company. They would take care of you. Well, that's not the case anymore. And there are reasons for that. Some of them are steeped in the financial crisis we've had. Some of them are due to globalization. Some of them are due to changes in the workforce. And some of those are due to technology. But that has changed. I would say that any person that's out there that has an idea that they want to be their own boss, be an entrepreneur, to try something different, whatever it would be, give it a shot. There's a school out on the West Coast called the University of San Diego. Very forward-looking school. A gentleman by the name of Dean Gomez is a bright individual, and they have excellent statistics out there. But he has really put together a program, in my opinion, that addresses the needs of the new workforce. Did you know that 37% of the graduates from that program start their own business? Because that's what a lot of these young people are doing. There's a section in Berlin, there's a coffee shop in Berlin where I think there have been more .com or more people that have come into some money or done quite well by developing a program, approach, an app, or whatever. And I think the technology and everything that is at our disposal today can give young people the chance to pursue their dream. So if you're sitting there listening to this and you're not sure or you're lacking confidence, but you have a good idea, go for it. Because the last thing that you want to do is to look back 5 years from now and say, gee, I wish I would have done something then because that would have really worked. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, try something else. But if you have a dream, go for it and follow your gut.
All right. Now you're sitting in a room of kindergartners, and they've asked you to come and talk to this group of children. They don't know much about success or starting companies or IPOs or buying and selling companies, and their understanding of money is almost non-existent. What do you talk to them about? What's something that you tell them or talk to them about that you think they can comprehend, that they're going to take away and is going to improve something about their, maybe at least something for them to think about? Kindergartners.
I would, in no particular order, I would encourage those young folks to adopt good habits. Adopt good habits that could cover a range of it, but adopt good habits. And number two, treat everybody with dignity and respect. Okay. Number three, stay positive. If you have something that is negative or you want to say about somebody, talk to them face to face. Don't do it through social media. Don't spread rumors. Don't spread innuendo. Number four, listen to your parents. They do have your best interest in mind. Number five, just be careful who you associate with. Associate with good people who support you and are always there for you. Now, will they get all that?
No.
I don't know, but they get
probably not. Probably not. But and it was an out of left field question, but I was just picturing you, and I think that's.
I walk in, they might run out of the room too.
They might. They might. All right, so we're coming to the end of the hour. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I have one last.
I have some more time, Jeremy. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. All right. This question, I've asked a few other guests, and I've gotten some interesting responses. So I'm going to ask to you the same question, and hopefully it elicits something. Tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Now, that is a good question. What is something that is true that almost no one agrees with me on?
Right.
Man, the wheels are spinning right now, Jeremy. the wheels are definitely spinning.
Yeah, it's not meant to be a trick question. It's not a setup.
No. I'm just trying to think about what's true that people don't always agree with. I think that every citizen of this country should be required to either put a certain amount of time in either the military service or some type of a national service. When I say national service, it could be something helping communities, something helping, our country, as a civil servant. And this is not a novel concept because some countries do this. But, I think every citizen every citizen in this country has an obligation to do something to give back. And I would like to see our country have a plan where everybody has to give back at least for a small period of time. I think that would be a very good learning experience for them as well.
Do you think there's a reason why that hasn't happened? And do you think there's a reason why anybody would think or disagree with you on that?
Well, the reason it hasn't happened is, I don't know all of the reasons, but I would say that it's probably not very popular in some circles. Okay. And let's say, Jeremy, let's say that you're running for Congress up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And all of a sudden you're at a debate and your opponent goes, Jeremy's going to make your son or daughter go into the military. Okay. Now, can you see where this is going?
Yeah, sure. I do.
Yeah. And so maybe that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's more like of a viewpoint of how you're viewing the country that you live in. And you're saying, look, I don't feel like I need to do that. But why do you feel, and again, I mean, I don't want to get on some socio-political discussion with you, but I get the sense from you that that's how you feel. Like you almost feel like we don't have a great enough value on the country or this organization that we're part of. And you feel like we should be more participant in the structure of what our foundation is. Is that accurate, or am I misspeaking? Or
I mean, if you look at my background, I mean, I went to the Naval Academy, and I was privileged to attend, and I might add, I did graduate, but I was privileged to attend and serve my country. And I just think that a lot of people, not a lot, but I think some people just take things for granted, and you have to give back sometimes. And when I say give back, I don't mean just taxes. I mean, you have to give back with time and effort. And I think it would be something that would broaden a young man or woman, a young lady or young guy perspective in terms of, the country. And, it would teach them to work with a group of people, as a team, and maybe it would be a skill set that would help them later on in life. And by doing that, maybe they'll find something that they like to do and find enjoyable. Or by the same token, maybe they'll find out this is something that I don't want to do, because as you know, Jeremy, deciding what you want to do is sometimes knowing what you don't like. So, but anyhow, I just think we need to I'd like to see us, more people give back. And, a lot of people do in many ways, but I'm just referring to more of a formalized system where it becomes something that everybody has to do.
Yeah, no, I get it. And, I think a lot of us really don't know what we want to do, even when we're doing it. And then we also come to a head where we're like, wait, I hate what I'm doing. This is all I know. I only know this one thing. I don't know what else to do, and then we have to read your book. I can definitely appreciate that. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? I mean, I don't want to cut you off. I know you said you wanted to circle back to a couple things, but go ahead.
Well, I would say that, if there's anybody out there that's, in your listening audience that is dissatisfied, doesn't like what they're doing, or maybe lacks confidence, you could do something about it, because at any stage in your career, anybody can successfully apply these principles in the book. And, just put together a plan and follow through with it. You just have to understand, too, that no discomfort, no growth. So just take that first step and then the next one. And with each small success, you'll eventually grow. But if you have the inclination to do something and you need to get motivated, well, read the book. Maybe it'll help you.
So what's your next move?
I'm going to have lunch in about 2 hours, I think. Okay.
Okay. I meant long term.
Right. Long term?
Yeah.
Well, if you go to Amazon, I don't know if you looked at the reviews on Amazon. They're pretty good.
Mm.
Nearly 3 dozen.
I haven't, but I will.
Okay. Well, if you do, when you do, the reviews on Amazon are good. And that's encouraging to me. But it's also discouraging, because right now, my next step is to get the word out to a broader audience about the benefits of this book and how someone can successfully apply these principles to develop the mindset and habits for success that will make a very positive difference in their life. And that is why talking to you and being on this podcast is so important. So for anybody listening, just consider that, give it a shot, and I thank you for it. So, if anybody has any ideas in terms of what I could do better, that would be I would be interested in, seeing that and applying that. I would also be interested in hearing from anyone about how the book has made a positive difference in terms of their life and where they've been able to apply these principles successfully. But I'm open to any changes or anything I can do to improve the book. I mean, you can always do a revision 1, can't you? Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any plans for a second book, or plans to kind of go in a different direction, or use that as a platform or step?
Well, the ink is just dry on the first one. So
yeah.
No immediate plans, but I do have a seed that's germinating in my brain. It's about a second book, and I'm going to start on that in the second half of this year. I just want to get through this introduction and
right.
Make sure as many people find out about this book as possible.
Awesome. Well, Fred, again, I just want to thank you tremendously for taking the time to talk to me and us today. I think it was a great interview. I mean, I asked you some difficult questions. You were happy to answer them. You didn't stutter. You didn't stop. You didn't say, hold on, I'm not going to answer that. So that was great. I mean, it definitely shows the kind of person you are and the character that you have. And again, I thought the book was really good. So I want to thank you. Well,
you're quite welcome. And you're right, Jeremy, those were some pretty good questions. And, for the audience out there, none of these questions were pre-submitted. They were all done on the fly. But again, I think that's what makes for an interesting podcast, isn't it?
It definitely does. All right. Thanks again to Fred Stuvek for joining me today. Fred's book is available everywhere. The book is It Starts With You. Again, very easy to read. As far as getting in touch with Fred, there should be some show notes underneath the podcast, including all his links to all kinds of social media. I want to thank you guys all for listening in and sticking it out for the whole episode. Your feedback means a lot to me. So I know I say this on pretty much every podcast, but letting me know what you like and what you don't is really going to be beneficial for me. I've got some really good guests lined up over the next few weeks. Also, before we wrap, I should let you guys know that I also have published the podcast to YouTube. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you like to listen to YouTube. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody again. I appreciate everyone listening to the Get Better podcast, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye.